welcome to the Culinary Saijiki podcast. My name is Allison Whipple, and twice a month I'll bring you a conversation with a fellow haiku practitioner about the way that food and the seasons show up in their haiku practice. Visit www.culinarysaijiki.com to listen to the podcast, read long-form essays on these topics, and sign up to join the podcast conversation. You can also support the project at buymeacoffee.com/Culinary Saijiki. Enjoy the show. All right, it's officially the first episode of the Culinary Saijiki podcast. I'm recording this from my dining living area in my apartment in Austin, Texas, about 2 weeks before I take off for St. Louis, Missouri, and about 2.5 weeks before this podcast officially gets launched. And I have a nice cup of East Side Earl Grey tea from the Steeping Room, one of my most favorite places in Austin. The Steeping Room is not a sponsor of this podcast, but their Earl Grey blend is absolutely my favorite. If you didn't already know, this podcast is a companion to the Culinary Saijiki blog. And over there, when this podcast launches, I'll have just wrapped up a 3-part series on my initial observations on the way food shows up in haiku. And you can also find the May 31st bonus post featuring themed submissions from the haiku community. If you want to be part of this podcast, you can head over to the blog, culinarysaijiki.com. And yes, that link will be in the show notes. And click the join the discussion link to fill out the Google form to just give me a chance to get to know you and your work a little more. All right, my first guest is my dear friend, Agnes Eva Savich, who is the fearless leader of the Austin Haiku Study Group. And if you are a supporter of this podcast on Buy Me a Coffee, the bonus for the month is her Polish holiday salad recipe. It's a potato, egg, vegetable salad combo. It looks super delicious. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the Polish name because I will butcher it, but I will type out the correct name on the Buy Me a Coffee post when that goes live. So Agnes and I recorded this in the last week of a very hectic semester, and we actually recorded this at the University of Texas at Austin campus, tucked away in a little teaching assistant office that I had some access to. And I'm so happy to have her as my first guest because I really admire the way that she balances a full-time job and her family life and her creative life. That's something that I think most of us have to struggle with, especially because if there's no money in poetry, there's really extra no money in haiku at all. And so I really appreciate having Agnes as a very just calm and a steadfast presence in my creative life, who is someone who is doing the 9-to-5 thing and being present for her family and still finding time for her art. That's something I've been really nervous about as I'm transitioning into a new career in a new city and not sure how I'm going to make that all work. And even though we don't really discuss these themes so much in our conversation, when I was reflecting back and listening to the talk, I realized that was one of the things I really most admired about Agnes, is the way she manages to keep it together and find some semblance of balance in a really unbalanced world. So without further ado, let's go and listen to that conversation. All right. right, it is officially episode 1 of the Culinary Saijiki podcast, and for my very first guest ever, I have Agnes Eva Savich, who is the leader of the Austin Haiku Study Group. She's a university program coordinator, oboist, and widely published haiku poet since 2004. Her work has been published in haiku journals, anthologies, and contests. Among her other activities, she founded and still leads the aforementioned haiku group in 2019, our fearless leader holding it down. She served as a judge of the Haiku Society of America Merit Book Awards in 2022 and the Vancouver Cherry Blossom Festival contest in 2020. She edited A Charm of Finches, the Haiku Society of America Southwest Region 2021 Members Anthology, prepared the memorial presentation for Haiku North America 2021, led a Ginkgo Walk at Hot Springs, Arkansas 2021 Haiku Conference, and will be a presenter at the virtual 2022 Haiku Society of America National Conference. She has resided in Poland, France, and Chicago, and currently lives in Pflugerville near Austin. So welcome, Agnes. I'm so excited to have you be my podcast guinea pig.
Thanks for having me as your first guest. This is exciting.
So do you want to go ahead and read a couple of haiku for us?
Sure. I'll start with these first two. New Year's Eve, the kiss of beer froth. New Year's Eve, the kiss of beer froth. That poem was published in First Frost and also received a Touchstone nomination, which was very exciting.
I nominated it.
You did?
I did.
Oh, you rock! That's amazing. Okay, yay. Okay, and this next one I will also read. Valentine's Day. My feelings and I eat another chocolate. Valentine's Day. My feelings and I eat another chocolate. And this one was published in Prune Juice and was also selected by Lee Garga and Scott Metz for the Haiku 2022 anthology from Modern Haiku Press.
And so I wanted to lead with these two because one of the things I've been noticing in my research on food and haiku is how specific holidays often connect with specific food words. So I was interested in these two because they do touch on holidays. And so I wanted to hear more about your process, if you remember it, and the ways in which you felt that the food and the holiday had a relationship to each other in the poem.
Okay. Yeah, and then the New Year's Eve one, I was thinking of, celebrating New Year's Eve and how you aren't necessarily with the person that you get to kiss, and so you have this private moment of like, yes, it's a kiss of the froth of beer that's in the glass. So, I've been married for almost 20 years, so I have had the luck of having somebody on New Year's Eve to kiss all the time, but it just made me reflect on that as I was having a beer around that time, that, there is this, chance of loneliness also on New Year's Eve for many people, or, sometimes my partner had to work, and, then I would be alone for some part of New Year's Eve, so that sort of loneliness still conveyed for me. But yeah, so I just really felt that it kind of highlighted both the celebratory nature and the sometimes lonely nature of holidays with this particular consumable item.
And what about Valentine's Day?
And Valentine's Day, yes, a lot of feelings about Valentine's Day. Staring at that box of chocolates again, relationships are hard. So even if you did receive a box of chocolate, you might be full of feelings, and it just becomes this process of. I think it's kind of almost a cliche thing of like a woman like eating the box of chocolates and like crying and I'm having wine or something. So for me that's kind of what I was envisioning here. Again, sort of like the New Year's Eve poem, this both positive and maybe negative aspect of the holiday that this food brings out, a sense of, certainly joy. I mean, chocolate is a joyful thing to eat, but also, you know, maybe the melancholy of as you reflect on that holiday, and what that food becomes to symbolize to you.
Yeah, there are very few holidays that don't have, I think, some sort of level of like tension or ambivalence to them in some way or another. I think the way we approach food in that can definitely help us connect to that tension in some way or another. I have very mixed feelings about Valentine's Day. Like, I'm not opposed to it, but also I'm like, I'm always busy and tired, and the semester's going on, and also I feel weird about like obligatory gestures of love. But I also love chocolate.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, just so many feelings go into that chocolate moment you might be having.
Yeah, and I think the New Year's poem really, they connect because they can both be in a way about like escape. There's the eating your feelings, and also, you know, we can drink to escape. It's
Agreed.
If that's your poison, that's definitely a thing that we do. And I one of the things that I'm looking forward to exploring more with relation to holidays is that sort of the way the food comes in and really has that holiday ambivalence about it, whether it's like, I love Christmas cookies, but I'm so sick of baking Christmas cookies, or other things. All right, do you want to read a couple more?
Sure. We'll move on to this one. Duraflame. My daughter and I eat candy corn. Duraflame. My daughter and I eat candy corn. This one was published in Frog Pond back in 2018. Duraflame, in case there's international folks listening, is a type of sort of fake log that you can buy at the store if you don't want to burn real wood. It's some kind of a chemically induced piece of wood and packaging. You just light the edge of the package on fire and you have this sort of real fire, but it's some condensed chemical thing that is burning. And of course, candy corn is also sort of it's not really corn, it's just a very fake sugary product. So I thought that juxtaposition was fun between those two things. Okay, and then the next poem is Juicy Cherries, Lakeside Picnic Turned Skinny Dip. Juicy Cherries, Lakeside Picnic Turned Skinny Dip. That one was from the lovely journal Kingfisher back from 2020.
And when you sent me your haiku, I sort of grouped these together, and I grouped them together because of their proximity to nature and outdoors. And, you know, really they could, like, all of these sort of spoke to each other in their own way, because, you know, candy corn, that's, in the United States at least, that's a pretty seasonal association. And my first impression with the Duraflame candy corn piece was candy corn is like one of the most polarizing candies out there. But also camping can be a really polarizing activity. Like, no one just like kind of likes camping. You either love camping or you're like, I absolutely hate camping and never want to go camping again. And I don't know if that's anything you had intended, but to me, I'm like, oh yeah, like the polarizing nature of the candy corn and the polarizing nature of camping really go hand in hand together.
That is not what I intended, but I love that. And also maybe even from an environmental standpoint, the polarizing nature of burning something called Duraflame instead of actual real wood. I'm not totally sure about the environmental impact of this chemical conglomerate. Nor of the whole candy corn production process either, because I think that's like 100% corn syrup solids, which that's contentious as well. But yeah, and I've certainly used the Duraflame logs while camping sometimes, especially if it's damp or humid in Texas. It can be hard to actually light real wood, so Duraflame is handy to have in your trunk if you really want that campfire experience without necessarily all the labor of real wood. But yeah, I think that moment can be applied to both a camping environment or even a home environment and the fireplace as well. And it's also like a nice, whether we are camping or in front of the home fire, we are having a mother-daughter moment. So that's sweet, and it's just through, well accompanied by these modern items, fake wood and fake candy. I don't know.
Yeah, and you're hitting on something that like I hadn't even thought of, is that also just like for campers, like your level of camping can be really polarizing. Like my partner, his Boy Scout master, like they would just like leave you in the woods and with a knife, and then 2 hours later you had to have a fire and a shelter built. Like his Boy Scout leaders were ex-Army Rangers from the Vietnam War, so he got like a real hardcore Boy Scout experience. But so he can build a fire, and then I remember him like showing me how to build a fire, and anyone who knows me knows that I am a pathologically impatient person, and I'm just like, can't we just like light a fake log? And he's like, you have to learn to build a fire. The first time I ever went solo camping, I actually was not able to have a fire the first night because I was too impatient and I did not split my logs properly, and it didn't go so good. But so there's something to be said for those Dura flames if you're not opposed to them.
Yeah, definitely convenient. Just like a single light for 2 seconds on the edge of the paper, and then the whole thing is like a beautiful blazing fire just a few minutes later.
And then I'm like, my grandfather would be so disappointed if he knew I was okay with Duraflame, but I own it. I like camping, but I don't really like building a fire at all. So, and the cherries I love, and again, like I could have grouped the haiku I asked you to read in so many ways, but I loved the cherry one. Is just, to me, that is like pure summer, and in part, picnics can happen a lot of time in the year, but cherries are stone fruit season. Which is summer. Stone fruit season is my favorite fruit season, personally. But then also just like incredible, like a very like flirty and sensual poem. Yeah,
definitely. Cherries are also my favorite fruit of all time, and there's something a little bit comical too about, I'm literally saying juicy cherries turned into a skinny dip, but it's like, you can read the subtext and you can figure out what's happening. Like, okay, you imagine people eating cherries, probably a couple, and there's just something about that sensual nature of eating the cherries and separating that pit out inside your mouth and spitting it out, and they're so plump and juicy, and it can just turn erotic quickly, and thinking like you started off on this like picnic, then you got to the cherries, and all of a sudden everyone's taking off their clothes and you just have to get in the water and cool off because the cherries were so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this one as well. I'm so glad Tanya McDonald appreciated it. Also, it was at the time I was also thinking of the great Haiku North America conference of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where there was a big skinny dip session in the hotel pool late at night.
I've been missing out by not attending any of these.
Yeah. There were some instigators and some very enthusiastic participators, and then sort of some half participators. And we also wrote a renge about it afterwards, which was really fun. So, I was kind of synthesizing that memory, but then was trying to think, seasonally and more fun in a different setting, and that's what came out of that.
Yeah, and it's reminding me of I never remember, like, people say I used to go to poetry at Round Top will happen again, but before the pandemic I went regularly, and I think it was Amy Nizuka Matitio. I could be wrong, but I think it was her in a workshop that said, either she said, again, I have a terrible memory, but either she said it or someone said it to her, which is, you can't have a poem about mangoes without it being about sex. But I'm like, I don't know, like maybe also that's cherries too, because like I remember like because I was in marching band, and nothing is weirder than a group of marching band kids. We'd be at like band camp and someone would be like, oh, like if you can tie a cherry stem with your tongue, and I'm like, how could you even do, like But I remember that, and yeah, the act of eating the cherry is just a super sensual thing, and like, I don't know, the cherry emoji gets used in very suggestive ways. Like, the cherry as an image really has like consistently evolved that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, even just to like slang expressions like to pop someone's cherry, right? Losing your virginity, there's that aspect of it as well in there. And then the whole stem of the cherry thing, I think doesn't that refer originally to Twin Peaks and the character?
It might, yeah.
That she does that when she sort of goes undercover at this Canadian whorehouse, and that's how she shows the madame that she is like worthy of this job.
Yes.
She's like,
yeah.
Let me show you something, and then she pops a cherry in her mouth and does that.
Yeah.
Spits out the little tied stem. So I don't know if that was like their original moment where that sort of happened, or if that's referring to something else.
And I think like, yeah, Twin Peaks would have been on the air when that happened, but I also was not watching Twin Peaks, so that would have been, I've managed to live in a weird pop culture bubble my whole life, so I'd have just been like, why are all the flute players talking about this? I'm so confused. But yeah. Awesome. 2 more?
Sure. Let's move on to this one. Thunder. The flash of a knife cutting an onion. Thunder. The flash of a knife cutting an onion. That one was from the Seashores Journal. And the second one is Deep Winter, the baby's bottle of moonlight. Deep Winter, the baby's bottle of moonlight. That was in Heron's Nest, and is actually the only poem ever to have gotten nominated in the Heron's Nest Reader's Choice Awards, which I thought was really, really cool. It was a highly rated poem in 2018. So.
That's impressive. That's challenging. And I grouped these together because of, I was interested in the way that they're sort of interior observations of an outside natural world in different ways. So with the knife haiku, was that something that came out of a cooking moment? Was that, I'm really interested in how that one came about.
Yes, so that one, I was doing a lot of theoretical reading around that time, and it was talking about like the secret associations underneath things, and so I was thinking very literally also, because, you know, thunder and lightning, right? So like, instead of, when you hear thunder, you immediately think lightning. So to illustrate that lightning, I thought the flash of like a knife reflecting light would be like lightning, and it's a different kind of sharpness, it's a different kind of light. And then cutting an onion, moving on to that image, you know, when you cut onions, you cry, and so that was like, the tears are kind of like the rain that's going to result from the thunder and lightning. So yeah, it was like I was trying to illustrate a moment of nature, but while using sort of household things, and to have that image be unexpected. Because you hear thunder, you might think the flash of lightning or something, you know, something straightforward like that. But so in this, I was like moving inward and trying to illustrate the rainstorm in a different way.
Yeah. I love, and taken a certain way, you could actually, I'm like, oh, that could be a horror haiku.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's the ominous to have a knife as part of a poem, I guess, yeah. But
I do like, and when I think, because at the time of this recording, we've been having a lot of rain, and like, there is something about like the way that lightning seems to make a cut, but like a really jagged cut. And thunder, it can like cut through silence in a certain way. And so I feel a little like synesthetic about that poem. And I just, I love it. And I love the idea of the onion relating to the rain. Yeah.
Yeah, and just like that slicing motion too, like as you slice down into the onion, maybe in the same moment as a moment of lightning, like the light will catch on it, and then you just have this like, it's chopping through all the layers of the onion just as that lightning bolt might be hitting through, you know, all the layers of the atmosphere, or hitting whatever it's hitting, and cleaving it possibly, you know. So yeah, I just had like this moment where those things really sang to me together.
And then the baby bottle of moonlight, like that is my, of all, like, and obviously I love all of these, because I was like, please read them on my podcast. But that baby bottle of moonlight, like, that is my favorite image in this set that you sent me. And like, I don't have kids, I'm not gonna have kids, but like there's something about like the whole, it was very cozy, and yet in a way like, obviously like it connected to me. I saw the milk in the bottle, the Milky Way, so it was like very big and cosmic and mystical, but also very cozy at the same time, and I loved that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Both my kids, when they were little, we had this little room off of our main bedroom, and so it would always feed them in there, and the window would, you know, often in the middle of the night, so the window would often have the moon in it, and I just remember, you know, holding up that bottle and like, yes, it's milk, but like, because the only light in the room in the middle of the night is the moonlight, it's like, to me it was like, well, that bottle could be full of moonlight, you know, because it's all white and stuff like that. And I just thought that was really, like, the idea of feeding my child moonlight. And also, you know, I always feel like I need the disclaimer that I breastfed both of my children, but I was also, you know, believed in pumping and storing, so sometimes the dad could feed the baby as well, and sometimes it was nice to just give them that, especially if they had eaten recently. So I feel like the disclaimer, obviously bottle feeding, breastfeeding, it's all wonderful, taking care of your baby. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but just for me personally, I feel like I need that disclaimer. Because furthermore, the fact that, you know, for me, the distinction of it being breast milk in there, like, further kind of ties it into this like timeless, you know, since the beginning of time kind of thing. The moonlight, the Milky Way, the milk that comes out of mammals to feed their young, you know, and also that sense of deep winter where it's cold outside, and I know that doesn't necessarily suggest snow, but one could imagine snow as well as the other sort of white element, juxtaposing with all of this. So yeah, I definitely did mean that sort of cozy atmosphere and the, you know, safety inside kind of thing while winter and nature are happening outside. Yeah. And that moonlight coming into the child.
No, I love it. And I know that it's so, you know, I've been reading a lot, and there's some people that I heard some person say like the moon is an overused image in haiku, and I'm like, it's kind of just one of the foundational images.
Exactly. We can all find a fresh view of the moon, of the moonlight, and specifically in the juxtaposition we choose to engage it in, right? Like, it's classic and not overused, I don't believe.
No, I'll never get tired of a good moon haiku. Although I right now, I pretty much write all of my haiku walking the dog in the morning, so I have almost no moon haiku.
Well, day moon though, lots of possibilities with that day moon.
Yeah, I haven't seen one yet, but it'll show up eventually. All right, I think you have 2 more for us.
Great. Hot sun, my pear core feeds ants. Hot sun, my pear core feeds ants. This very simple 7-word haiku was lucky enough to win it was one of Mr. Hasegawa's 10 winners selection in the 3rd Bashoan International English Haiku Competition. That was very cool. This next one is a 1-line haiku. Spring slurped from an oyster shell honeymoon. Spring slurped from an oyster shell honeymoon. That's from Heliosparrow.
And I group those together. Again, all of these are like clearly super sensual in their own way. But there is something about the sensuality of those in particular and the way they related to eating that was intriguing to me. So that's why I wanted to pair them. Together. Pair. No pun intended.
Yeah, that's a really interesting pairing. I definitely see that second one as the more sensual of the two, but I guess there's a lot of senses involved in that first one, just maybe not the sexy ones.
No, it's not. But, yeah. That's not sexy, right? But like I'm thinking of like the way like there's like not only is the ants eating the pear core, right, and like there's probably a line of them going in and out, but also the way that like that pear core is just because they oxidize so fast, so the way it's decomposing and like turning brown and turning to sugar and like getting sweeter as like the sun beats down on it and the ants come and like get their little sugar rush and leave. Yeah. So like to me it's like I can see the ants, I can feel the hot sun on my skin, I can like conjure up that like taste of a really like oxidized brown sweet pear. That to me, like, again, like I got a really multi-sensory experience from it.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing to that was in my experience, which was just sort of the saving grace of these ants, because I'm fairly environmentally conscious, and I don't like things like food waste, and I like to compost when I can and things like that. So just this idea of I'm sitting in this hot sun, I've just eaten this refreshing pear, and just the thought that this pear core, instead of going into the trash, is now going to continue to nurture these little creatures underfoot everywhere. The ants, they're going to decompose it further, and it's going to do further good than it did just me. Like, we're all going to benefit from this pear. So I feel like this really like elevated that pear to be just important, not just to me in that moment, but to the environment in that moment, and just elevated and saved it. The redemption of the pear.
Maybe that's going to be the episode title, is The Redemption of the Pear. I don't know. And I always wonder, like, can animals taste things? Like, there has to be some, like, level of, like, tastingness. Like, but I don't know. I have not researched this. I'm sure someone will, like, hear this and be a entomologist and can send me a whole treatise on whether or not insects can taste things.
Yeah, I think it might be, the way that they swarm around sweet things. I feel like it's fulfilling some kind of maybe the equivalent of a sweet tooth or a sugar rush kind of thing. Yeah, like you were saying. So maybe it's not taste, but it's like an overwhelming desire to consume more of it.
Yeah.
In some way.
And it also, obviously, this is about ants, right? But like I've seen, like. In the fall, like, and this is, I didn't mean that's a summer poem, but in the fall, like, fruit will drop, and if it doesn't get, like, picked up, it'll ferment. Like, I've seen, like, bees get, like, drunk on fermented fruit, and then they're like,
yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, I'm always amused by drunk bees. But yeah, so to finish off with the oysters, and I love a good oyster. I'm like, we're recording this before I move, and I'm like, I have to go to the Gulf Coast and eat some oysters before I leave.
Yeah, I'll start off by noting that I was actually talking about my actual honeymoon, which was in the spring in New Zealand, and so that oyster was a jumbo New Zealand coast oyster, and that image just came back to me. I mean, like 20 years after my wedding here, to submit there, and I just wanted to put it in one line because it's just sort of all coming together, right? It is spring. It is the start of new things growing. I'm on my honeymoon. There's this enormous oyster, and we're having this sensual moment, on our honeymoon, slurping these giant oysters. And one thinks of a honeymoon and all the lovely, fun, sexy things that happen on that. And so, the aphrodisiac nature of oysters, definitely feeds into that. So it's just sort of three kinds of new things, new exciting beginnings, and sensual things happening all at once. So that's why I wanted to sort of put all of that together into a single haiku moment.
Ostensibly toward the, in his last years of life, Walt Whitman would eat a dozen raw oysters and drink a bottle of champagne for breakfast every morning.
Wow, Walt, that is decadent.
Not like a, I think they just like came in smaller bottles back then. Like you can get them in Spain, like just smaller bottles of cava, and I'm like, oh, I'm like, that's my ideal retirement. It's just oysters and champagne.
Oysters and champagne.
All day long.
I want to throw some vegetables and fruit in there just for balance.
Well, yeah, that's what lunch and dinner are for.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. We have officially recorded this first podcast.
Excellent.
Thank you for being here. And yeah.
I wish you luck with the rest of it. I can't wait to hear what other guests you have and what other kinds of foods and beverages they bring to the haiku table. Discuss, and yeah, thanks for having me as a guest.
All right, thank you. I hope you enjoyed hearing that conversation as much as I enjoyed getting to just sit and talk with Agnes and record it. So if you loved that and you want to have a conversation about haiku and food with me, again, go over to culinarysaijiki.com, click join the conversation, and we will get something set up. Also, if you fill out the form and I never reply to you, just ping me via email, and because the form goes wonky sometimes. It hasn't yet, but I have been pandemic online teaching long enough to know that sometimes technology just doesn't work. So if you fill it out and don't hear from me in a couple of days, please definitely check in and let me know, because I do want to talk to pretty much any haiku poet who also has an interest in food, which, given my reading for the blog project, I think that's most of us in one way or another. And again, for those of you who buy the project a coffee, I'll be sending out Agnes's Polish holiday salad recipe. It looks delicious, and right now most of my kitchen stuff is packed away. I'm doing some real minimal sort of pantry fridge clean out cooking, but I feel like I'm gonna maybe make that for a 4th of July celebration once I'm a little more set up. The next episode drops on July 5th and features Krista Pandy, another mainstay of the Austin Haiku Study Group. Yes, I did recruit pretty much all of my local haiku friends to be on the podcast. Also, Krista's just a real solid person in the Austin poetry scene in general, even though her focus has turned to haiku in recent years. And we're going to be talking about eggplant and squirrels that eat all the fruit off your trees, and the lows and occasional, bright spots of the COVID dining experience. So I'll see you here in 2 weeks. Until then, enjoy some poetry and enjoy a nice cup of iced coffee, because it's getting hot.